begin. Hi, everyone. My name is Halima Siddiqui, and I'm the project coordinator here at Health Nexus. So, Health Nexus oversees several provincial initiatives related to FASD. The FASD provincial website, where you can find recent and up to date information about what's happening, learn more about resources and tools, and find out services available in your local community. We also allocate subsidies every year to 40 plus support groups for individuals with FASD and their families, and we designed an online training for service providers from various sectors, including healthcare and nursing, education, mental health and addictions, justice and corrections, and community and social work. Before we start the presentation, we would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, let's take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous people and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can each, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Today, we are welcoming four wonderful speakers that we are interviewing. First is RJ. Having not received an FASD diagnosis until his late 40s, RJ Formanek was startled to find how many of the strategies he had used throughout life were a result of FASD. RJ found that the sharing of these strategies were a helpful educational tool and that, along with founding the Facebook support group Flying with Broken Wings, gives him a unique insight into living with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which he shares freely. He is a co-founder of the FASD advocacy and support group Red Shoes Rocks, which shows that FASD is real and many people are dealing with it every day all around the world. RJ also speaks widely, advocating for people living on the spectrum. It is through team effort that there is more research and education being done, and getting this information out to the public is important. Next is Lynn. Lynn is a mom, spoonie, mental health advocate, retired teacher, avid reader, passionate about research, cats, and lifelong learning. She started the first selective mutism support group in Canada after helping her daughter overcome selective mutism and overcoming selective mutism herself. That's at least three generations she's impacted, and probably more. She's a caregiver for her adult child with debilitating neuroimmune disease, MECFS. Right, next is Reinier, who knew something was wrong from the time he learned to walk. He felt different from others, and others constantly would reinforce that message over the next 50 or so years. Then, at 56 years old, Reinier received a diagnosis that he was on the FASD spectrum. His development in the womb had been affected by alcohol. His brain was indeed different. This information set him free to finally be himself. We also have Kate today, who is a marketer, a spiritual director, and Rainier's life partner. All you can do for another person is to be in an environment that if they wanted to come up for air, they could. We're thrilled to listen to the interview today. Please ask any questions you have in the Q&A section, which we will go over after the interview is over, and I'll provide more information and links in the chat if need be.
Thank you, Halima. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is going to be fun. This is a group of people I am very fond of, and I've had the pleasure of meeting in person. So thank you, panelists, for joining us today for an open, frank discussion. I'm looking forward to it. All of the panelists have seen the questions in advance, but that said, I want to remind you, if I ask you a question today and today you don't feel like answering it, that is just fine. The goal here is for everybody to be comfortable and relaxed. Also, viewers, I want you to know that you're free to ask questions. We're not going to take questions until the end, but feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A function when you think of them, and then Halima is going to ask them at the end of the session. So now on to the discussion with these four amazing people. So I'm going to start by asking a question to Reinier. So Reinier, we're honored that both you and RJ are on the Health Nexus FASD Advisory Committee. And Reinier, you're the one who brought forward this as a potential topic for one of our webinars. I think it's a great topic. The advisory committee did, all of the staff did, but I want to know why you thought this was an important topic for us to bring forward.
I think mostly as a compassionate act for my partner, Kate,
Mm.
um, which is kind of funny, but there's truth in it too. I think all relationships are very tricky, um, and that's when you've got neurotypical people wrestling with relationship with kind of standardized positions, whereas when you're dealing with someone on the FASD spectrum, it's so individualized and it's so non-traditional. Like you can't just pick up a relationship book and it translate it over to FASD world and thinking. So I think it's really important for people out there who are thinking of either engaging in a relationship with someone on the FASD spectrum, or someone on the spectrum is thinking, gee, can I ever find love? I think it's really important that those of us who found a way into this particular arena, that we maybe leave some breadcrumbs for our other folk out there that would like to also find a relationship that works and is good for everybody involved.
Thanks, Reinier. And on growing on that note, Kate, what was your initial reaction when Reinier suggested that you participate on this panel with him?
Well, that was very sweet of him to suggest that we do this. And I think I was curious as to how that would work, but I was also curious to meet others who were in relationships with people with FASD or FAS because it's the material out there seems to be mostly focused on caregiving. And I'm his partner. And as a partner, my role is different than caregiving. And so this was an exciting opportunity to meet Lynn and to meet RJ and also to connect with others who may be in the same situation. And also, I guess if there are practitioners out there too, that if they're coaching someone or spending time with couples and couples counseling, it's huge to kind of identify both parties in that.
Mhm. Thank you, Kate. Now, RJ and Lynn, you have a bit of a different relationship. You have a long distance relationship, long-term relationship. RJ, do you think that that helps or challenges your relationship, or both, and how?
Well, that's kind of six of one and half a dozen of the other. Relationships are so much what you make of them. And in a case like ours, distance is not, with today's technology, distance is not what it used to be.
True.
So we're able to communicate on a daily basis. In fact, we chat on either on text or on Messenger or something all day long. So
Mm.
it isn't so much about that, but each of us came together at a later age, and we have established lives and things that can't necessarily change. So that reality was something we had to deal with. And, through a lot of communication and discussion, we found ways that work. And, for someone who does what I do, the fact that she puts up with me is amazing because, I mean, you see me, I'm all over the place. I'm never in the same place for very long. It's not, it's chaotic, but I'm able to keep her a little separate from that, so I'm more comfortable. I hope she's more comfortable with that, and it seems to work.
Mm. Well, and Lynn, what would you say would be advice for people in long distance relationships? How can you help to make it work?
I think that trust,
Mm.
respect, communication are extremely important. I think trusting your own feelings, trusting your partner's feelings. I think, whether you're in, a relationship in the same city, or like RJ and I, you're in a long distance relationship, you need to always trust your feelings, be open about your feelings, and really, for us, we're used to um, coexisting. It's separate lives, but we coexist really well. And, like RJ said, I'm sort of kept to the side a little bit. I find it kind of protective, because when he goes into his big gigs, it can be very daunting. When I'm not used to that on a basis the way that he is. And so I find that really endearing, really very comforting. And the last thing I would say about that is that we are very keenly aware when one another needs separate time. So I know, if he's coming up to a gig, I need to back off and, not message as much as I ordinarily would.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I have that little sort of pang of disappointment, like, I want to talk to you, but I know, I can't right now, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, even that just shows how you're making a long-term relationship work. You really are understanding each other and what your needs are and how to support each other. Now, all of you started your relationships at a slightly older age. I think I'm allowed to say that because
What did you say? Say that again.
So this question's for you, Reinier. Be on your toes. Do you think if you and Kate had met in your early 20s that your relationship would have worked?
Hard no. Yeah, I don't think it
Would
would
you
have.
elaborate?
Yeah, I think I should. um, I I know I was a very different person. Again, I was, in my 20s and 30s, I was a man without a diagnosis.
Yes.
And so I was already a moving piece in the puzzle. And Kate is a very, very alive and very also mobile, I mean, in mind, body, spirit person too. So I can only partially get a sense of what she was like in her 20s and 30s. Um, we're both very much into personal growth. So I also can only kind of assume with reverse engineering that we both weren't probably as sharp as we are now. Not that I'm super sharp, but I'm a lot sharper than I was. So I just think it would have been a really confusing mess. We might have been attracted to something in each other, but I don't think the depth, for me at least, would have been there to hold us together.
So interesting. Kate, what do you see as Rainier's best qualities?
Well, I think firstly back to the question about being in his 20s. I love the age that he is because he's a little slower slowed down, and I can only imagine what he was like in his 20s. So, yeah, so like the qualities I love about Rainier though is his enthusiasm for life and his open-heartedness, I mean, he's sweet, he's kind, but he shows up as well, and that's a huge thing. As chaotic as life can get, he's mindful of the important things, which is good. Not always the small little things, details, but he's always shows up when he can see that it's needed, and for our little family. So it's good.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
And his
was
sense of
wondering,
humor. I could go on. I mean, we're
yes,
we're a couple, so I could go on and on.
sense of humor is so important. I also find you always have such a calming presence whenever I talk to you, Kate. Like I can see that how your calmness would nurture a relationship. I've always noticed that about you. Let me see. The next question is for Lynn. What would you say that RJ's best qualities are as a partner?
Oh my goodness, where do we start? He's kind, he is loyal, trustworthy, he is funny. He's extremely funny. He knows how to, pull me out of I am say a funk. I have a lot of trauma, so he's able to, to see if, I'm being triggered by something. he's able to divert my attention and get me onto something else and, be my cheerleader. And I think that's so important. And he doesn't just listen, he hears. And to me, they're very different things. Um, and I would have to say he's a great conversationalist. I am going to go out on a limb here. I may be wrong. Um, I personally am not a small talk. What do you call it? Small talker. I
Yes,
can't
yeah,
think of the
like
word.
kind of chit
It's
chat.
the fiber
Yeah.
fog. Yeah. And so I think he's like that as well. And so when he has something to say, he will say, and we can deep dive into these conversations, which are incredible. And finally, I would say he's a storyteller, and his knowledge just absolutely astounds me. Every time I hear him speak, I come away with, what I like to call RJ-isms. He has something that's so passionate that he is able to share. And I like to think that I'm, the recipient of that knowledge. So, yeah, I think those are really wonderful qualities that he has.
Oh, that's lovely, Lynn. Thank you.
You're
RJ,
welcome.
RJ, what are the things that you and Lynn do that help to make your relationship work?
Oh, I'm just trying to get over the of all that. I
Yeah.
need her for PR purposes. That was incredible.
Well, this is being recorded and transcribed, and it will be put on the FASD Info TSAF website, so you'll be able to listen to that over and over.
Oh Lord. Okay. Sorry. The question
The
again. How does
question is, what do you and Lynn do that you think helps to make your relationship work?
Well, as she's already touched on it, as Len has already said, space is vital,
Mhm.
and being able to pick up on each other's feelings, emotions, and energy for that day. So on the days when we're able to match energy, if we're far apart or whatever, we'll be watching YouTube videos or movies, or like she said, having discussions about anything and everything, because it's just fun to explore thoughts. And like Lynn loves books, so we have a lot that we can talk about there, because I have thousands of books myself. So these same interests that aren't fads or passing fancies, these long-term life interests that we both had, are things that we can both, just glom onto in a second. So she'll say one word or I'll say one word and the other one will be like, yes, okay, and we're off and gone. So that understanding that she has, because again, ADHD, as you can tell, I bounce around my thoughts. There, um, there is no box. That whole idea, everything is wide open. And she's able to, even if she can't keep up, she can make the jump when needed from one area to another. Like I might have gone through 15 different steps along the way. She can do the long jump and get to where I am. So that's, something that helps so much when just in living life, in dealing with another person on a long-term basis. Generally, relationships have only interpersonal relationships have lasted 5 years for me. They've had a shelf life. And by that point, I'm totally out of tricks and I have nothing to say. And she's still listening to me. So, got to keep my fingers crossed.
It's lovely. Now, okay, Kate, at what stage in your relationship did you learn that Reinier has FASD, and did it affect your relationship in any way? And if so, how?
Well, I'm grateful that I did know prior to meeting Rainier that that he had FASD. I think it's still different though than being in the relationship. Because, as many, as RJ mentioned, the boxes, as many boxes as you tick on a check sheet doesn't mean that it is the human that's in front of you. And so there was all of these parts of Rainier that were high functioning. And I mean, again, I could go on about his sense of humor and his intelligence and things. So you kind of mask some of the FASD things because you're in, the beginning of a relationship is all, wonderful. And we have been together for 4.5 years. And so maybe we're coming up, RJ, to the 5 years. That's terrible. I hope not. But we own a house together, so I
I
can't
did
see
want
that
to mention
happening.
that.
But what I would say is that knowing that he had FASD really helped it stick because the times that Rainier was, I guess, exposing himself from a FASD perspective, little things like attachment styles and things like that, and needing more reassurance. I think in a different scenario, I wouldn't have understood. Whereas I actually just knew that in those instances that Rainier just needed me to show up and to be there and to hold space for that. And I have my quirky things too. And I think maybe just through experience in other relationships and, we were just able to find our way and navigate it. But I absolutely believe wholeheartedly that you need to disclose FASD. I think as caregivers too, being able to support the partner in that is huge. But I also think the partner needs to really identify why they're present in the relationship so it doesn't turn into a caregiver situation, because I think that's really been something I've been really mindful of, is that Rainier is a separate individual and I'm separate, and while we don't live apart and we own a house together and so we're living in the chaos together, that I find tools that helps him ground and center, and vice versa, that we show up and communicate in that way when it's presenting itself. But I definitely think it's important. Also, though, I would say we've moved communities. And so where do you draw the line in actually introducing FASD, acknowledging that Rainier has FASD? Because I'm always cautious that that's not actually my job to do. That's Rainier's job to do. And when does he do that in new friendships or new relationships? We think about that and navigate that too.
Interesting. We've got a lot more questions, but I just want to thank you all already for being so frank and open. This is so interesting. So Rainier, what do you see as the strengths that you and Kate share as a couple?
Oh, we've got quite a few, but there's some real core ones. We both really believe in compassionate honesty, and we don't always agree on which one's more important at any given time, but we know it's not just about being truthful and it's not just about being compassionate. It's navigating. There's times, what's the saying? Know when to fight your battles, know what, choose your battles wisely. And I think a lot of the times we have an ability to always hold each other's heart in that when things get hot or out of alignment. We're both very committed to being good to each other. And I have to admit, I'm not always great at it. But my intention is there, and I believe Kate knows that. So whenever there's a fail on my side, it wasn't because I'm a malicious butthead, And so we're both very committed to being good people. And that's not just in our relationship. I think we see each other being that way in the world. But man, if you can't be good to your partner, then you shouldn't be a couple, And so we have that very deeply. We also believe in evolution, which means, gosh, we both have permission to grow. I think a lot of relationships, people come in with a set of here's how it is, and then they spend their whole 30 years just trying to make sure it never changes. And it's, for me, that's not what Kate and I really, we know human beings grow. And so we're very committed to growth, and we're very committed to being loving and good to each other in that, so we can support each other in improving the things that need improving. As has been said, I could go on, but I will now take my finger off the mute button.
And you know what? All four of you are demonstrating goodness in the world. So I'm sure you have goodness and kindness and compassion for your partners because you're all making a difference, contributing to society in different ways. You really are. The next question is for RJ. So RJ, what do you see as your and Lynn's strengths as a couple?
A shared experience, I think, is the first thing. Like I've been talking about, and Lynn has mentioned, we both experienced, I'll be honest, horrific levels of trauma throughout our lives. Different ones, absolutely, but we both had a lot of pain. And I think that gives us the sensitivity with each other, even though it's not shared trauma, it's an understanding of how that manifests at this point in life. We talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary. We're talking about long-term effects of CPTSD and these things like that. And understanding that that's there and knowing when it's rearing its ugly head gives us, I think, a strength that many other people might not have because of the deepness of that connection. We protect each other, essentially. So we're able to sort of mold as a unit. Now, we don't live together, and I don't know, and we discussed it, I don't know if we could. I'm very set in my ways. I'm very much a single guy. If it's like time to play the drums, I'm gonna go play the drums kind of thing. So that, how that manifests itself, that it's not a threat to us, it is another strength that we have. So I find that we build on a lot of unconventional ideas, but they're ideas that fit us.
Interesting how you're mentioning music. Just look at the screen behind you and behind Reinier. If we were only in the same place, you could be playing music for us too. Lynn, I've noticed, I think we've all noticed that all of you have wonderful senses of humor, and it's come up more than once already today. How do you think having a sense of humor helps you as a couple, or do you think it's helping you as a couple?
Absolutely, yes. There are so many times that RJ will say something, and I'm kind of staring at him, wondering, like, I'm not really getting what you're saying. Could you please, reword it in a way in which I will understand? And, again, because of trauma, that's been a really hard thing for me to learn to do. But through our 8 or 9 years together, I've learned that it's okay to do it. And, diffusing a situation, if, for example, I'm not the world's greatest photographer. I try to take pictures when we, go to RJ's, conferences and things like that. And, I used to get very down on myself if it wasn't perfect because he was a photographer. And then he'll just crack a joke and, oh, big deal. So, we'll go down there and we'll try it over there. And laughter really has a way of making you comfortable. And like I said, it diffuses the situation, and something that felt so intense in the minute is suddenly gone. It's like poof, it's gone. He's forgotten it. I've forgotten it. We move on.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You know what? Before I go on to the next question, seeing as you all have mentioned humor, does anyone else have anything they want to add about having a sense of humor?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to point out that, everybody seems to think RJ is funny, but I'm just saying I don't get the guy. I
Funny
RJ?
looking. It's funny looking.
Oh yes. Well,
Yeah,
Can't argue with that one.
I wanted to add too that I think sense of humor, that's the only way through sometimes. And
absolutely.
I can be a bit more serious, and Rainier just automatically shifts me out of it. And also, I would say that I think anytime you can use comedy in any um, any situation, it works. And I know Rainier went to a comedy writing class one winter, and he'd go every winter, every night he'd go, I don't want to go. And he'd come back, and then I'd get a whole stand-up routine. And I was like, this isn't worth it just for me, just for you to go one night.
Again, I do things for my love.
Aw.
Fantastic.
Oh,
Um,
I have to say the other thing that RJ does that makes me laugh daily is he sends me memes, and they are absolutely hysterical, and they lighten the mood, and I love it. I think it's a great way to to just make your day. Just have a little laugh, lighten up. And I sometimes need a reminder, lighten up, you're being too serious. And I'm hard on myself, and I need to not be. And he is so great at saying that, to me through the memes and through his words. He's great. Thank you.
I I am so much into the not I can't even call it a feeling. It's a whole way of being that laughter is healing. In fact, the more pain I'm in, the more chance I'm going to break out in laughter. I don't moan and groan. I laugh. And trust me, it's really hard to get medical attention when you come in. You're like, I'm in pain. It's one of those things, but it does heal. It helps me in those moments. So yeah, I really believe that having a sense of humor, even if it's self-deprecating, I make fun of myself constantly because yeah, I'm goofy as shit. Sorry, I'm goofy as heck. These
We
things
like to we
happen.
like to use the word shite here because that word is the you used is bad. So just
I like to use a lot of words that are bad, so I'm gonna try. I'm gonna settle down now. That's
well,
humor. Yeah, it's good.
sometimes saying them makes you laugh too, right?
there's that old saying, and it's really a truism in my universe. It's laughter is the best medicine, and I completely agree with RJ that I know that in fact for me that's one indicator I'm in trouble in my mental zone is when it isn't funny anymore. And I agree with RJ. Sometimes the
Yes.
darkest stuff is I can find humor in it. And maybe nobody else will find it funny, but I can do that. And if I notice I'm not finding the situation funny, it's a real good indicator. It's time for some personal self-care and stuff like that. So
Yeah, that's really interesting because I do a lot of work with a therapist who talks about polyvagal theory and your autonomic nervous system. And what you're saying, I think what she would say is that when you're at the bottom of the ladder, when you're in that sort of state of overwhelm, that's kind of when you lose your sense of humor. But luckily, we kind of climb the rungs of that ladder and come back out of it again. Oh, well, gosh, now I need to go back to more serious questions. Okay, RJ, if you were mentoring a young adult with FASD who's feeling isolated and looking to form a romantic relationship with someone, what advice would you give them?
Oh, a lot, a lot.
Okay.
First of all, Yeah, okay, I remember what being young and full of uh, zest for life was like, and so I realized that a lot of things that could be said aren't going to be listened to anyways. But you know, I would try to get the person to understand their own worth first thing, not to take any BS from anyone else. Um, it's especially if we're talking with someone on the spectrum, we're known to be fawning, to easily agree to things, to drop boundaries in the interests of being friendly.
Yes.
And I would, work very hard with them to impress upon them their self worth, and that would be a thing that then would predicate their actions. But that's the one that I would work on, because like I said, anything else or a lot of the other things that I might say are just going to be ignored in the hormone rage and everything else. But going back to, you're a good person, you're worth it, you have the right to say no or yes. So the biggest thing I've noticed for a lot of, especially, I don't even want to say especially younger, because I went through it until I'm probably still go through it, I don't know. That whole wanting to be something for someone else, and sort of giving yourself away in the meantime. And when you give away that, I think you put yourself in a bad position. So again, um, self, I don't self reliance, self, a good sense of self worth. I guess it would be the biggest thing that, and it would take a while. I understand that's not a quick step thing. So often you do end up having ongoing conversations, but if you can plant that seed, the person will often come back to you going, well, how does this work, how does it, and they're able to build their own sort of safety net themselves, where they have people that they can talk to about, is this a good person, is this a bad person, and help them make those decisions. So a little bit towards the self-worth and interdependence in, maybe get a second opinion, because I know that, yeah, a lot of times a second opinion helps.
Hmm. That's so interesting. And coincidentally, in the last week, I've done two presentations to groups of caregivers, and we were talking about relationships. We were also talking a lot about technology. And I think that's something that maybe all of us didn't have to deal with when we were in our youth, but it's just the vulnerability too with technology and perhaps not sensing danger and how that can be complicated. I'm just going to put that out there if anybody wants to, and that wasn't one of our pre-agreed questions, so no pressure, but yeah, I'm finding it interesting how often caregivers are asking for advice on how to keep their loved ones safe on technology, and a lot of that is perhaps being on, say, a dating site and someone pretending to be someone they're not, or at an age they're not, or things like that. Perhaps older, even perhaps younger. Do you have any sort of advice on supporting safety in those sorts of situations?
I think one of the most challenging things is, and RJ's got a lot more experience than me in the advocacy department and whatnot, but as I'm kind of new getting into this, is yeah, how do you teach safety? Because there's a lot of neurotypical people that get themselves in an awful mess of
Absolutely.
trouble. Um,
Absolutely.
so I think again, just telling someone who has FASD, don't do that.
No.
It's just not an effective strategy. Even if you explain them, here's the 12 pages of scientific reports why you shouldn't do that. I don't care. I'm not. So it's how do you inspire them? Back to RJ's thing about self-worth, self-esteem. It's like the how do you develop that part in them that they will look after themselves because they know what's good for them themselves, you know, not because they were told it's good or bad. And that's something that I'm still puzzling how to do that with when you're mentoring or helping someone on the spectrum.
Well, I think that has to do with the relationship that you build, and being consistent and there. So for parents, it doesn't start with when the phone gets purchased. It starts a few years earlier, developing that relationship, so the child doesn't feel embarrassed to talk to them or to tell them, oops, I think I screwed up.
Yes.
They don't feel that it's an invasion to share passwords or whatever, to get the person in that mindset. Now, once you get to the adult age and later teenage, you know, you're dealing with issues where if they want to, that's great. If they don't, that's up to them. And then you just have that communication key. So I think, again, keeping the relationship open as the child is growing up is going to help so much when it comes to that thing, because from the people I've talked to, the kids are finding it as scary as the parents are too, because they're the ones that are being put in these unsafe situations, and so many of them so young experience it. It yeah, that personal relationship is so important.
And I think pulling it back around to us adults having relationships, I wonder if it's, you know, how do you start educating young folks or people who will want to move towards having intimate, like one-on-one relationships? How do we start getting them ready for that? Like RJ said, long before they're actually going to be ready for it, because as we know, the learning curve sometimes for the FASD folks can be a little bit of a longer curve. So I think a lot of this has to be, you can't wait until the barn's burning. It's too late then.
No, you have to answer questions. You have to answer them honestly and truly. Most of the trouble I ever got in my entire life was because I wanted to know why. Why I got so involved sexually so early in my life was because I was curious and people would not answer my questions. So I had to go out and find the answers for myself. So we can prevent someone having to explore on their own if we just answer questions. And yeah, it can get a little dark and a little scary, and sometimes the subject might be a little uncomfortable. Tough. The kid. Sorry.
No, I totally agree with, well, it's not, you're the experts, but I really agree that if we don't talk about it, then we're not going to be able to help support our loved ones. We have to keep that dialogue open. Um, and my next question was just about advice for parents. So particularly Reinier and RJ, I think you really just touched on it, but do you have any advice for parents on how they can be supportive as their I think what you've clarified when they're younger, but when they're older, is it even a family's place, or is it again just to keep communication open? Do you have any advice for parents?
Well, other than what we've been speaking about right now, one thing that I quite often see is parents will assume, often wrongly, that maybe we do better with somebody else just like us.
Mm,
And unfortunately, mixing two neurodivergent people is not always a pleasurable experience. That's, again, individually wholly dependent. So I've seen parents who are asking, hey, are there any FASD affected people who want to date my daughter or something? And it's like, no, 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 no. Please. One person might be dealing with enough And when you mix the two of them together, that could be toxic. So I advise highly against that. Again, but if two neurodivergent people do get together on their own and want to experience, I'm not going to say, no, you can't do that either. But I wouldn't necessarily, it's almost like setting people up to fail, if you know what I mean. The chances of success of that sort of a mixture might be really, really low. So I would advise against it.
Okay, the last question I'm going to ask both Lynn and Kate, and then we're going to get on to the questions from our viewers. So Lynn, what advice would you give to someone who's in the early stages of a relationship with someone with FASD?
Learn about FASD. You need to know what you're dealing with, who you're dealing with. You need them to know that they're not bad, they're not defective. I would suggest looking for trusted resources. Shout out to RJ's group, Flying with Broken Wings, Health Nexus. Reinier, you started your own group, I believe, in Nova Scotia. Am I right?
Half right. I didn't start it. FANS, Fetal Alcohol Nova Scotia. It was started by Alan Montford and Rochelle Howlett. I'm just helping support them from the inside out.
Okay, perfect. So there you have it. I think that's really, really important. I think prioritizing each other from the beginning of your relationship is really important. Communicating in a way in which your partner, like I was saying, rewords things. If they're not understanding, then they're not understanding. Something is missing. And I think, using plain language gives them time to process what it is that you're saying. So, those are my little tidbits of advice. Sometimes RJ, with his ADHD, will talk fast, and I'm trying to keep up. And, so you can just slow down just a little bit,
Giddy up.
but it works. It works. Communication is paramount. It's absolutely, like I said, get to know the person, get to know that there is nothing wrong with having FASD any more than there is with having diabetes or, having some other disorder or disease or some such. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. What about you, Kate? Would you add anything to that?
Well, that was a good list because I absolutely would agree. Starting to investigate and research what FASD is. And then, of course, then your friends and family do as well. And they give you all the reasons why you shouldn't be in a relationship together and ignoring it because the FASD checklist is one thing, but the human being is another. And you don't ignore things that are not healthy for you, but I have expectations in my relationship. I have boundaries in my relationship, and you set those right away, whether you're in any relationship. But with FASD, if I didn't understand that language and didn't understand triggers for Rainier and vice versa, I had to be really clear what some of my triggers were because he can sometimes be boundaryless. That I was clear, and as soon as you're clear, it's kind of creating that do or die list, like what can I live with, what can I live without, and I couldn't live without him. So how do we find ways to be in that space together?
You're all so amazing. You're
You
just
do
wonderful
not just a notice,
humans.
a note to the world. This is
Yeah.
a gift to the world. Do not forget Kate's birthday ever.
No, these things are important about being kind though, and communication is huge. It's I think we can get so stuck in what a diagnosis is, and if we don't focus on the good qualities, then we can't get through the bad stuff together. And that piece is it's been paramount, which is, why we're here together. And we have to be able to be supportive of each other, and he shows up and I show up, and that's all that matters.
Thank you all. Thank you very, very much. Halima is going to ask questions that have been put in the Q&A function, and feel free to add more. People who are watching, but I also just want to remind all the panelists that there is no pressure to answer a question. So if a question is specifically for you and you don't want to answer it, you don't have to. Just give us a sign or just say no thank you or something like that. But oh my gosh, Halima, I'll pass it over to you and mute myself because my phone is.
Thank you, Nancy. So the first question we have over here, how do you figure out how the person you're with communicates and still communicate in your own way while still getting the message through?
I think I'll go first since I'm talking first. I think in every relationship, that's one of the first things is everybody has a slight different way they talk, and in their head and in their listening and everything. And that's one of the first things you got to do. That's why it's very important, I think, early on, is to have some fun and play and stuff, so you can kind of learn how the other person communicates. And I think you can't get through a message through if you don't have an idea of who's receiving that message. Just because I understand and think this way, I can't assume the other side does. So Kate and I do a lot of reminding each other of how to listen, and how if I didn't get it, say it again. But don't just say it again. Say it again differently.
Before you get into a relationship, I think you should be friends with the person. Know them for however long. I'm the type of person who I couldn't get into a relationship unless I knew the person already. Like that just wouldn't happen. I'm closed off quite a bit, and for me to be willing to open up, I have to know. So yeah, establishing a friendship, and just as RDS was saying, um, do the fun things, go out, hang out, get to know the person, and you'll automatically begin to understand their communication style and what works to what actually they will intake and what they'll just ignore. And experience, yeah.
I would say definitely spending time together is really important. Being friends, it has to start with friendship. To me, that's the basis. You can't have love without friendship. And understanding the person's likes and the person's dislikes. I know RJ needs his coffee. Wherever we go, yeah, RDS is laughing. Um, but it's a known he needs his coffee. I love coffee, not quite to the same extent, but that's an important thing for me to know. So, I'm right there with a cup of coffee. When he arrives in Toronto, which, by the way, I do have to say, this is funny, and a little off topic, but it is funny. He knows Toronto so much better than I do. Like, that is absolutely hysterical to me. He can walk out of the hotel, figure out which way is which. I've lived here since I was 12. I'm 63. I still don't know my way around. I still get lost. But he comes in, finds his way around. And I'm like, how did you do that? So yeah, I think definitely get to know each other, and the self-deprecating, attitude. I laugh, when he says to me, not that right, your other right.
How can our young adults with FASD explain or seek supportive relationships with a partner? Dating can be tricky at that age and vulnerable to being exploited. How can the red flags be developed without becoming paranoid?
Man, that almost to me doesn't even feel like an FASD question. It's just a human problem with young folks these days. Um, whew. RJ, you answer this.
Yeah, isn't that always the way? I would have to go back to that communication channel, the openness to share what's going on, and if that's missing, it's going to be really difficult to make that a reality. So this is another one that starts out years before, and FASD informed parenting, and being the supportive person that understands, and that the person with FASD, in this case, the child or teenager, feels free and open enough to talk.
Yep. Yep.
Nobody can be forced to do anything, but if we plant the proper seeds, the right flowers will grow and the bees will come. That sort of thing. Like, make a space where they want to come to open up.
Yeah, I agree with RJ 100%. If you want to keep your kids safe, then and you really feel that you have the ability to help them with that, then you have to make sure that your relationship with the kid is such that the kids have that same faith, and so that they will come to you, not because of anything other than that they to trust you. They have that relationship and love built up.
And they don't feel alone. Like they're navigating this whole www by themselves, that they have support, that someone cares, that there is someone there.
Yeah, because otherwise they'll go to their buddies and friends on the street, and it's not going to be the best info.
Are there any myths or misconceptions about FASD and relationships that you think should be cleared?
Yeah, I don't mind responding to that in some way because as I alluded to, when friends and family learned that I was in a relationship with someone with FASD, I had lots of advice. And and of course doing the research too. I took a step back thinking, wow, am I ready for this? Am I prepared for this? And so I was looking for the markers, the little things that would be identifiable as FASD. And my sense of it is that you have to know the person. And even then, it doesn't prepare you for the experience of what happens in a relationship like that. But I think there's a lot of myths and misconceptions. I think lying is one of the things. That's one thing I was really surprised about, because Reinier is not that, right? In fact, he tells the truth brutally. And so I think that in any relationship that you're in, being able to, they come with the same instincts and values and morals that we all do. And so you got to judge the person as an individual, as opposed to it being, just a checklist of symptoms. And one of the things I love about Reinier, was one of the things I really detested in the beginning, was that he was so attached, but he's so loyal. He shows up. He's right behind me. I go to do something around the house and he's right there and helping. So it's one of the things that I learned to adapt my needs, possibly for always having a space and autonomy, because I really enjoyed being able to give someone else the task to support me with. So I think we have to be really careful when we start labeling. But I think, going back to what Lynn and RJ mentioned about trauma, being able to understand each other's triggers is huge. So, clear communication helps avoid that right from the start.
Over here we have another question. This one is a bit specific. Where in Edmonton can I get information that you are speaking about today? I am married to a man with FASD, and there doesn't seem to be any support for me and my family on this topic.
It's a largely unexplored topic. Relationships, sexuality, these are areas that, well, I'm going to be honest, this is the first time I've seen anything presented in this area. So, yeah, it probably is not a lot out there. I don't think a lot of people have looked into it or felt that they wanted to share, maybe. So this is, I think, very brave of all of you to be on here. Like me, I'm an idiot and I go out and I talk about anything and everything all the time. But for you guys to come out here and speak is very, very brave, because this is a largely unexplored area.
RJ is 100% on the money there. He is an idiot. That's a little joke there, folks. That's a little joke. I love you too, brother. But no, seriously, RJ is 100% right. There's not a lot of people with FASD sharing from their heart to start with, but also asking their partners to stand in the firing line as well. And so to the person in Edmonton, first of all, I lived 5 years in Edmonton. I know it a little bit. If it sometimes you think, oh my gosh, this is such a backwater for information, especially on this topic, it's just because it is. It is. And that's why I really support other people on the spectrum in situations like RJ and Lynn and Kate and I, and to speak up as best you can, even if it's little truths, but we need to get more of it out there so that we can populate these data banks. Again, if people don't get the information from those of us who are living the experience, they will find stories about it from people who are not living the experience, and it will not be accurate. So it is hard to get the info, but keep asking for it. That helps.
Yeah, I was just also going to add that Alberta is one of the more sort of resource-rich places in Canada for getting information. So there may be some groups, if you want to reach out to us after, we might be able to help direct you to some groups. But I do think that this is a pretty unique situation in that we're really focusing on the positives. That's why we're so happy to have all of you here today, and why we're so grateful you brought up the topic, Reinier, because you're giving hope to people, you're celebrating your relationships, and you're showing that as with any relationship, it takes work, and that it's worth it, and that you're having these successful long-term relationships.
But yeah, that was the last question that we had, I believe. So thank you to our speakers for the wonderful presentation, and for participants for joining us and listening from across the province.
Thank you so much, panelists, for sharing so honestly and openly.
Thanks all you guys. Love y'all, and keep getting the word out. Thank you.